people talk about good versus bad bacteria, it's
Yeah.
intuitive as to why they're doing that, right? Bad bacteria would be, a pathogen, something that could make you sick or even kill you potentially. A good
Mhm.
bacteria, I guess what's implied there is that it's contributing something to your health or to the functioning of the organism, potentially even something that's necessary. Do you think it makes sense to talk about good versus bad bacteria? And if so, what does good mean to you exactly?
Hmm. It's such a good question, Nick. I guess I can't help but think of good versus bad because a lot of our studies have identified bacteria that are beneficial. But I think in reality, it's definitely more of a spectrum. Good bugs can go bad for
Mm,
sure. There can be organisms in your body that might be providing you a benefit. And then if they're provided an opportunity, let's say they get out of the gut and into the systemic part of your body, they could cause a problem. So I think I think what you're hinting at is absolutely right. And there's not always good bugs and always bad bugs.
mhm. So some of the good ones can become bad, and my understanding is that this often means they have to sort of be in the right place. They have to be contained in the right area, and if they get out of where they're supposed to be, quote unquote, then as you said, they can become bad.
That's right. Yeah, definitely they need to be contained. Most of our microbiome lives in the intestine. So certainly if those microbes get out, let's say they get in your liver or in your blood, they're going to cause problems. Although, most of them are highly anaerobic, so they, can't survive in highly oxygenated areas.
Mhm.
So most of them will rapidly die. But yes, if they get out of the compartment, they can do some bad things.
Yeah, and I've had microbiome people on before, and we've talked about various aspects of it. So my understanding is basically, right, we've got our immune system, you've got microbes in your gut and elsewhere, and the immune system is sort of there's sort of a delicate balance there. On the one hand, you don't want to destroy some of these microbes, but on the other hand, you want to contain them, keep them at bay, prevent them from going where they're not supposed to be. Can you give us
Mhm.
just a general basic sense for some of the communication that happens between the immune system and the microbiome?
Sure, definitely. Um, I'll focus, I guess, on the things that my lab studies because I know that stuff best. So we're really interested in antibodies. So most people are familiar with what antibodies are, but they're molecules that B cells produce. And you make a ton of them in your gut. The average human makes about 2 grams a day
Hmm.
of an antibody called IgA. Um, and these antibodies are one of the primary ways in which we contain our microbiome. So these antibodies are very specific for microbes. There's lots of different parts of your immune system. Some of your immune system is very general and just recognizes, cell wall components of bacteria. But there's another part of your immune system which is very specific. And this is the part that antibodies are part of. So these antibodies are highly specific for the microbes in your gut, and they help to control them. And they don't just they do keep them contained in their area, like we were just talking about, but they also control the types of molecules that they let those bacteria express.
Hmm.
Bacteria or fungi are viruses, I should point out. So they don't let organisms express molecules that are harmful to the host. So if
Hmm.
there is a harmful toxin or adhesion or something that makes that organism invasive to the host, antibodies will target it, and that bacteria will downregulate expression
Mhm.
of it. So it's not about always getting rid of the bacteria. It's kind of about controlling their function, their behavior.
I see. So it sounds like we IgA, this antibody we produce quite a lot of it. And if
Yeah.
I'm hearing you correctly, normally when I sort of naively think about antibodies, you sort of mass produce them when you get sick, and they sort of just cover the entire outside portion of a bug, and then
Mhm.
that's sort of a step towards destroying that bug. But it sounds like
Yeah.
these IgA antibodies, they can actually be used not to sort of destroy or completely suffocate these microbes, but they actually just control sort of, there's sort of a molecular communication there, and it controls what the pathogens are actually making molecularly.
Yeah, that's a great interpretation of it. And most people think like you, Nick, where they think about the mass production of antibodies and they're in our blood and their whole function is to tag a microbe for destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And IgA does do that in the gut. It just, IgA is different in the sense from other antibodies in the blood because it doesn't mount, there's no inflammatory response associated with IgA. Its sole purpose is to target those organisms, and it does get rid of, basically it groups the organisms that it wants to get rid of together, and then you will essentially poop it out. So there is some eradication that happens, but ultimately those bacteria, because of that response, will downregulate those molecules.
And before we get into some of the specifics around some of the work that you've done, some of your recent studies, so when we say that there's good bacteria, and with the caveat that good bacteria could become bad and things are a spectrum, like what are some of the major things that we know good bacteria generally do? Is it that they are providing key nutrients that we can't really produce otherwise or absorb otherwise? Is it that they're sort of merely taking up space to box out pathogens? Like, what are some of the good things that tend to come from these gut microbes?
Well, I think you named, some of the top two that people think about is, first of all, they take up a ton of space. That kind of excludes any pathogenic bacteria. This is actually like a really important function of the microbiota because they have evolved to live with us peacefully, whereas pathogens haven't. So by them taking up the space, that prevents us from getting sick. And C. difficile is probably one of the best examples. So if you undergo antibiotic treatment, you kill a lot of those commensal microbes, and then C. diff has an opportunity to bloom. And this causes a lot of people problems. Another major benefit of bacteria is indeed metabolism. So they do, we can't process a lot of the fibers that we eat, like cellulose in plants. Our microbes help us extract energy in things that we might not normally extract. They also produce molecules that help absorption of certain things like lipids and sugars. They can also prevent absorption of things that perhaps are not good for us. We still don't understand fully their metabolic capabilities, but we know that they're really important for metabolism. And then, of course, one of the major things, and that's what we study in my lab, is that they're really important in teaching your immune system about what to fight off and how to fight it off. So we in our lab, we use germ-free mice, which maybe you've had previous guests talk about, but these are mice that have no microbiome of their own. And if you infect these animals with any sort of pathogen, they basically just die and it's largely because their immune system hasn't been taught how to fight off that pathogen. So it's like really important for our immune system maturation.
Yeah, so the immune system has to be trained across development in order to function properly and effectively at getting rid of pathogens. You're saying if you create animals that don't have a microbiome, basically, there's no bacteria living inside of them or other microbes, their immune systems just don't learn how to function properly.
That's right. Yeah. So if you compare their immune system to that of a normal animal with a normal microbiota, they're missing a lot of immune cell populations. Or the immune system populations that are there are very naive, or they're, reduced in number. So it's a really important thing our microbiota does, is to teach our immune system.